Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com. And we are so happy to see you out there. And we know you're out there because we can count the number of viewers we have on our counting system here at allpointstv.com. We are the program called What's Going On, and we come on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're still around for an hour. So we'll be here today from 2 o'clock to 3. And you can, of course, tune us in at your leisure on YouTube, and you can also listen in at the studio over there on University Drive. That's Mr. Paul Herring, the great Mr. Paul Herring, that's over there at 92.1, and they are dealing with some things over there that they are getting through, and the minefields that are set in place for them, and they are navigating through it very well, and we know they're going to succeed in their efforts. I am so glad that we are still on this issue of impeachment, because we have to correct what's being said out here by the Adam Schiffs and others out here that are pushing this nonsense on the American people and, in fact, creating this scam. We're being scammed by these politicians. But there's something to be learned from it. They have their mask down, and we can look at and see what they're doing and take this as a teachable moment, because we have the unmasking of our political leaders in Washington. And this charade they're pushing, talking about impeaching the president reluctantly, they're saying how sad they are to do it. This pushing for his impeachment is only because Donald Trump came in unbeknownst to them and also without their approval and broke into their house, not in my house, but in their house, which is run by the two major political parties, the Democratic Party, and no less than that is the Republican Party. These people are in cahoots with each other. And neither one wants Donald Trump in there, because Donald Trump is an outsider, and because he's not paid his dues to arrive as the CEO of the country. They do not want him in there because he is very dangerous, because he's independent of both. And we have to understand here that Donald Trump is just as much of a threat to the Republican Party as he is the Democratic Party. And the only difference is that he did not purport to represent the Democratic Party. He ran as a Republican. But neither party wants this man in there, and that's why you're seeing what you're seeing in terms of their going along with a lot of things that are being said here. We don't have anybody really opposing what Adam Schiff is doing. They're talking about going and challenging Nancy Pelosi to remove his chairmanship from the House Intelligence Committee. And Nadler, who's over there with the House Judiciary Committee, which is, if this is referred to the Senate for trial, it'll come through Nadler's committee. You don't see one of them being pressured, not really to be removed from those chairperson positions. And what I don't see Lindsey Graham doing, for all of his bluster and talk, I don't see Lindsey Graham calling in the ones that the House is calling. They keep on having all these committee meetings. I don't see him calling the same persons before the Senate committee that he chairs. He chairs a committee in the Senate. And whenever they have anyone being called in front of the House that's controlled by the Democrats, he can then do the same thing in the Senate, where the Republicans are in charge. But do you see him calling in these persons before his committee to testify under the Republican members who are the majority in the Senate? You don't see that. And you don't see it because this is a ruse. It's run by the Democratic Party, more so in this case because the Democrats are the ones that have a majority in the body that brings about the impeachment. But you have the Senate playing a role in the impeachment process also, and their role is, in fact, to act as a backup in case the impeachment process, in their view, is flawed. They can do the trial is held in the Senate, and they can therefore come behind the House, and they can, in fact, rule upon the verdict that's been rendered in the House of Representatives which has the sole power of impeachment. But they don't have the sole power or any power to bring about the trial of the impeachment. The founding fathers, the framers, these iconic intellectuals, the first intellectuals, according to Ayn Rand, and so far the last intellectuals that this country has produced. Those persons in that room that are creating the Constitution and all of the tenets therein, these are what Ayn Rand calls this country's first intellectuals, and so far they are the last intellectuals. And I have to concur with that because I'm listening to them now in the media, and I don't hear any person that really understand the impeachment process. I've been talking about Alan Dershowitz for a while, but it's not just Alan Dershowitz. It's almost all of them that's on TV talking about impeachment. They don't even understand the process. And these are supposed to be constitutional scholars. The fact of the matter is that they both, when I say they, I'm talking about both parties, the Republican Party and no less so than the Democratic Party. Both these parties really do not like this outsider in there over them, and in a sense, as the CEO or the executive executor of the law, they don't like the idea of this person in there who didn't come through the networks, the two major networks, the Democratic network and the Republican Party network. He didn't come through either of those networks to pay his dues on the way to the top, and therefore, by being independent of both political establishments, he poses a threat that we have to understand, and that threat is posed to both parties. They want both political parties want Donald Trump like gone. And I don't mean gone necessarily in terms of the people going to the polls and deciding that, because both parties are pretty much aware that Donald Trump is resonating very loudly with the American people. I mean, you see that wherever the man speaks. Wherever he goes, and he went into the backyard this past week went into Minnesota. And he did not carry Minnesota in 2016. And he certainly was not going to carry the place where Ilhan Omar is the representative, but that's a district he went into. Went into Ilhan Omar's district, and also in the district which has a mayor from the Democratic Party, and he pulled 20 to 25,000 persons inside, had another 20 to 25,000 outside, and they had 100,000 persons in total to sign up for the event. Donald Trump said, based on what he saw in setting up this rally in Minnesota, said that in 13 months they are going to take the state of Minnesota. And if that happens, that means that what we are saying here, and that's what we are saying, Donald Trump is expanding his electoral base. The polls are saying that the president is not faring very well. But what our lying eyes are telling us is the same thing that our lying eyes were telling us leading up to the election in 2016. Because I was writing about this, by the way, on my wall, my Facebook wall, and I was saying that my lying eyes are not seeing what the polls are telling me that I should be seeing. Because I was seeing crowds going to Donald Trump's rallies, and I didn't see them over there where Hillary Clinton is going to kill him at the polls. I didn't see her pulling the crowds. And if that support was there, there should have been some indication of it visibly before the public that we could have, in fact, taken part in. But we never saw it, and it never materialized. And at the polls on November the 8th, 2016, we saw the gravitas of it, because we saw that the polling was really a projection of the wishes of the posters. It was nothing to do with what was actually happening on the ground, because you cannot have an election of that magnitude that swings in that direction so vastly and then having the polling right, because we were told that Hillary Clinton may get upwards of 400 of the 500 and 38 electoral votes, which means that of all the votes that would have been cast, 4/5 of them would have gone to, well, not 4/5 of the popular votes, but 4/5 of the electoral votes, which of course would be the voting that actually elects the president in this country. Because don't forget here, and I'm finding this to be a problem with a lot of persons that are commenting out here on the public domain, is that individuals do not elect presidents in this country. They never have. Presidents are elected. Learn this, because we have to understand the process, which they're trying to change, but we need to understand the process put in place by the framers, the first intellectuals, and so far, according to Ayn Rand, the last intellectuals. Individuals do not elect the president of the United States, and they never have, nor should we ever pursue that as a possibility, because that would be very dangerous. Because majorities are factions, and factions, when they get the rule of the roost by a majority of the vote, what we have then is that we have a tyranny of the majority, because all they need are the numbers. And they need not worry about how the minority factions, whatever those factions are, don't have to be necessarily minority in the sense of racial minorities. It could be gender. It could be sections of the country. You could have different ways of defining a minority group. But if you have a single majority and that majority rules, then they need not pay attention to the majority of voice. And therefore, pursuing its own factional interests, it becomes oppressive of the minority voice, because it need not take it into consideration when decisions are made. And the framers understood that, and that's why they were in that room, partially, to figure out a way to fix that problem, the problem of factions. And they did it in a brilliant way, without oppressing a majority faction. What they did was make sure that the majority faction did not have a monopoly on how things would go inside the country. And what they did was they created multiple factions. And so their majorities have to be considered in every state. And so they were saying that Donald Trump was not going to get 1/5, no more than 1/5 of the votes that decide a presidency in the United States, the electoral vote. Hillary Clinton was going to, in fact, just come and do a crushing of the Trump campaign. And then the election day occurred. And at the very beginning, the press, with its irresponsible reporting, held back on reporting the states that Donald Trump was winning in the early part of the day, and was reporting what it had predicted was going to happen. They were reporting all the states that were reporting numbers favorable to Hillary Clinton's campaign. And we thought, well, the die is cast, and what we're seeing is what we were told we were going to see. That is, we thought that they were who they said they were. And then as the day began to unfold and more states were coming in, and they had to start calling the election outside of their early reporting, which was they were reporting the 20 states that Hillary Clinton won, but Donald Trump won 30 states. In fact, 30 and a half states, because he got one of the electoral votes out of Maine. Maine splits its electoral vote. And they go about according to what percentage of the vote in the state of Maine goes to this candidate and what percentage the other candidate gets. And if they get a certain percentage of the vote, then they will allocate their electoral votes accordingly. And so Donald Trump, although he did not win the state of Maine, he did get one electoral vote out of the state of Maine. But 30 states voted for Donald Trump. So 3/5 of the states, 60% of the states voted for Donald Trump. And we should have opened our eyes up, because at that point, when we found that 3/5 of the states, 60% voted for Donald Trump, and the media told us the opposite would happen, we should have opened our eyes up at that point to what the media actually represents. Because unbeknownst to a lot of people prior to the election, but hopefully not so much today as it was then, we were not as aware that the voting in this country is really guided by the media. And they were trying to do it in this case by telling us that it was a done deal, and who wants to be a part of a losing effort. So by over a period of time telling us the election was over and that Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in to become the next president, who would then go to the polls and then vote for a losing proposition. And that, I'll tell you another thing that kills. Since it was internationally being accepted that Donald Trump had no shot at being president, then the collusion with Russia makes no sense. Because they would be no more so trying to affiliate with a losing candidacy than anyone else would be. Because if Hillary Clinton was going to win, why would they be over there colluding with the person that had no shot at winning? They couldn't vote in the election. And if they side with a loser, then that means that the party that's in power has a bone to pick with Russia, because they chose the wrong horse. And there's no less a problem that you have here in the United States. The way you do it in the United States is that people that have want influence in Washington, the way they do it is that they don't want to back a losing horse. So what they do, because they don't know how the outcome of an election will be decided all the time, polls can be wrong. So the way they do it, if they have a vested interest, is they support both campaigns, so that if this party wins, they're on the winning side. And if this other candidate and this other party wins, they also have some stock in that result. So that's why they go in both camps. But you see, the narrative they gave us doesn't make any sense. Because if they were telling us, and we were convinced that they were telling the truth, that, I mean, this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They were telling us that Donald Trump was going to lose in a landslide. So why would Russia then get on the bandwagon and try to promote the campaign of Donald Trump? That makes absolutely no sense. And that's not what happened. 63 million people had turned off their CNN, MSNBC. And they're doing it more so now than they did then. They've turned it off. Those persons on those stations are not being listened to.
See, I don't know any liberals are really weird because they don't seem to know much about marketing, and they think they're these masters on all kinds of manipulation. But going around calling people names and labeling people who disagree with you is not an effective way of getting it on your side. Matter of fact, it has just directly the opposite effect. And so that's what they've done. I mean, they label the population of being ignoramuses, but they say, okay, maybe we'll pause here. Okay, show us your information. And they engage in the rhetoric, and then they want you to buy their rhetoric, but not to have your thoughts of your own. Yeah, they're just calling people names. That's all they've been doing. I mean,
John, Hillary Clinton called half of Donald Trump's supporters. She said that half of them are in what I would call a basket of deplorables. Well, that basket of deplorables went to the polls. They were energized to go to the polls.
It's like
vote against Hillary Clinton.
It's such arrogance on these people's behalf. Like, don't you see how great I am? I can walk on water if you just give me. You just got to believe in me, because if you don't, you're the cause.
Yeah,
you're the cause. I mean, it just makes no sense.
They haven't seen anything yet. They know better than what they're telling the American people. I mean, we've been down this road before. They told us in 2016 that what did happen was not going to happen, and there was no chance for it to happen. But what was not supposed to happen, the way it's supposed to be, is not the way it was. And now they are trying to act like the polls are showing all these candidates that are over there in the Democratic camp, every last one of them. Beto O'Rourke, who I think has 1% in his own party. They're saying he can beat Donald Trump. He can't even get the votes in his own party. Kamala Harris. Now they're saying, since Biden's numbers are dropping in the polls, and they're doing damage control over there, that's why his son is making these statements about how the people around, it was really the people around him that he says were the problem. But it wasn't anything to do with the Biden family. It wasn't anything to do with Biden's influence. So they're doing damage control. But they're telling us right now that every one of those candidates is running in the upper tier of the campaign in the Democratic Party. They're saying those persons are every last one of them can beat Donald Trump. And if that were the case, and we're only 13 months out from the election, if that were the case, you've had this man in there for a little less than 3 years. And if it really were the case that they were assured of what they're saying in the media right now, that all of those candidates can beat Donald Trump, then the election is only 13 months away. And you can have the American people deciding it so it will not be seen as a coup against this president. But they're not waiting for that. And the reason why they're not going to wait for it and why they are going to go ahead with impeachment and they have no choice in that matter is because what they're telling the American people, again, is just as untrue now as it was then. In fact, it's probably much more untrue now than it was then. Because Donald Trump is going to win. And we saw it in Minnesota, just one indication of that. And then after he went to Minnesota, he went to Louisiana. And you saw the numbers he received there. So what you're seeing is whatever happened in 2016, and Donald Trump received 306 of the electoral votes, 36 more electoral votes than what is needed to become president of the United States, because you need 1/2 of the electoral votes plus one. And since there are 538 electoral votes, 1/2 of that is 269. And because you have to have a majority, then 269 plus 1 gives you the 270 apex that you need to elect the president of the United States. And Donald Trump had 306 to the alleged leader only getting 232 electoral votes. This was a landslide, to be sure, but it was a landslide in the opposite direction of what we're being told was going to happen in the media, and the media got it wrong, and they're getting it wrong now. It's time for us to look at the media because their mask is down, and we can now see behind the mask of what we had all these years reporting to us, and through subliminal messaging were in fact guiding us behind our back and without our knowledge and telling us how we ought to think about the issues. I mean, people telling us as they sign off the news, and that's the way it is. And speaking so authoritatively, we thought, well, that voice cannot be sounding that authoritative. It cannot be, in fact, there's no agenda in back of it. And that's not the way it is. That's 30 minutes of what's happening in the world where events are happening even as the broadcast is taking place, and that's not the way it is. There's 30 minutes of news that's been consolidated into a 30-minute, really about, since the commercials take, in a 30-minute program, take 9 minutes. So it's 21 minutes of broadcasting, and you got to congest everything that's happening in the world within a 21-minute time period in a program that lasts 30 minutes, and that's the way it is. I listened to that for years and years by Walter Cronkite, and I never thought that was not the way it is, nor is that the way it can be, given the fact that there's so much news being made, you can't congest it in 21 minutes. I mean, that's why they have these news programs on right now that last all night, because news is being made every second of the day. So some stations, unlike it was when I was coming up, because all the networks went off at a certain time. Now, stations stay, all the cable stations stay on all night. CNN doesn't go off the air, and Fox doesn't go off the air because things are always happening, and you'll see them breaking in. This is breaking news. So we now have the mask down, and it gives us a chance to watch with more clarity of how they operate. And now we're being told again, as if we had not been down this road before, that now they're telling us again that this is not going to go out, this is not going to go well for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has no shot. Yet they're not willing to wait until the election so we can have verification again of what they're telling us is true or not. Okay, we're going to take a break at this point from WFOV 92.1, and we'll be welcoming you back in 4 minutes. And we are glad you were with us for the first part of the program. We're not through yet, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. No, we're being told, we're being force-fed, but we're not. A lot of people in 2016 who saw the news reports and then refused to accept that as what they ought to do at the polls the day of the election. We now have a lot of people that are turning off some of that noise on TV. To be honest with you, the Fox network ratings have soared. Almost all their programs, every hour of the broadcasting day, all their programs trump what you see on CNN and MSNBC. When they say mainstream news today, they may be talking about the other stations because they have more stations than Fox. But in terms of where the viewers are over there with Tucker Carlson. Sean Hannity comes on after that program is over, and Laura Ingraham. They rule from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And even in the 7 o'clock slot, they are dominating, not as much as they are doing what they call the prime time programming, which is 8 to 11, because then that's when people have had their off work, they've had their dinner, they're now relaxing, they're watching the news, and between 8 and 11 o'clock, right before going to bed, here they are watching. Those are persons that are trying to get some information are watching the news programs. And Fox, if you look at their numbers, Fox is in fact destroying CNN. In fact, CNN doesn't have any viewers. I don't mean zero. But when you're not breaking 1 million in any of those broadcasts, if you have 800,000, let's say, viewers, just in terms of revenue, it's a disaster. Because, and it's a little secret, all the programming on television has one purpose. And that purpose is to deliver the viewers to the advertisers. That's what the purpose is. And I don't have a problem with that. That's how the profit system operates. You know, without profit, you don't have any businesses. So that's how it operates in television. But CNN has made a choice here, and it's an ideological choice, because although the viewers are now leaving those networks, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, which is the cable NBC station, even though they're losing customers, really patrons, viewers, they refuse to change their their ways because they're ideologically driven and they're willing to take the hit if they can, in fact, come out on top in the end. Okay, we want to welcome back WFOV, and we're very glad you came back. And as I always say, we were not very far from where we were when you left. So we are still around. We're still talking about this issue of how they're telling us that Donald Trump is not going to do well in the election that comes up November the 3rd, 2020. But if that were the case, then they could, in fact, forego them trying to take this matter out of our hands, the voters' hands, and put it in the hands of the elected officials who are supposed to be speaking in our name. So why then can't we speak in our name at the polls in 13 months? And I'll give you the answer to that. It's because they don't believe what they're telling us. Our lying eyes are telling us the truth. They don't have anybody. You can watch that. You watched that last Tuesday. Did you see anybody on that stage that you think they can take Donald Trump on in debate? Who did you see on that stage that can do that? You think that Biden can stand with next to Donald Trump on that stage? Kamala Harris, and this woman that has a real problem, I think, Elizabeth Warren. Have you seen anybody waving like that? Just waving. I mean, there's something going on here. You think Elizabeth Warren can be on that stage with Donald Trump? If Hillary Clinton could not do it, and she was much more polished with all her flaws, she was and is a polished politician. And she couldn't stand on the stage with Donald Trump. They kept talking about how he was losing this debate. He lost that debate, lost debate number 2, lost debate number 3. And we were watching debates ourselves, and we were saying, wait a minute, we didn't see that. I didn't see where Donald Trump was making a lot of mistakes. What I saw Donald Trump doing was, in fact, speaking from behind a mask and garnering support because that's what people want. When he said, for example, that he told in the third debate when Hillary Clinton said, you don't want someone like Donald Trump over the laws of the country. And he came back and said, because you'd be in jail. I don't know if you remember the applause he got. That's who they wanted in the White House. And they're not mad at Donald Trump yet. More people are embracing Donald Trump. And there was no better indication of that than in Minnesota, which he did not carry in 2016. But odds are, and I'm going to put a bet on it, a wager on it. I don't mean I'm going to bet in the money. But I put a wager that Donald Trump is going to carry Minnesota. And he's going to carry Michigan again. He's going to carry Pennsylvania again. And he's going to carry Wisconsin. And that blue wall that never materialized in 2016 will not materialize in 2020 because it's not there. There's no there. And they know it, and that's why they're panicking. Now, today, you may have seen some of the reports. It started last week. But you may have seen some of the reports where they're saying, where Adam Schiff is now backing up from saying that they need a predicate in order to bring about impeachment. And I was reading last week some of the comments on Facebook where people are saying that we have to stop Schiff from violating the Constitution. He's not violating the Constitution. What Adam Schiff did was come from behind the mask. You don't need a predicate to impeach. You need a predicate to remove from office. And when Adam Schiff came out last week and said that you don't have to have a quid pro quo in order to impeach the president. Why did he say that? I'll tell you why he said it. He said it because the transcript is out. They never thought Donald Trump would do what he did. This man is unconventional. He's not your typical wearing the mask politician. They never thought in 1,000 years that Donald Trump would release that transcript of that conversation between himself and the president of Ukraine. They never thought he would do it because you don't release conversations in private between heads of state, because the president has to do his business in private in order to, in fact, execute his responsibilities. You don't broadcast that on the 6:30 news or on the cable news that goes on all night, where you have breaking news, the president said this to this leader. You call press conferences of that. But when they have their dealings behind closed doors, where they get into serious negotiation, you don't have everybody listening in on that. But they never expected Donald Trump to do the unconventional. And what Donald Trump did in terms of continuing to outflank them and outsmart them, what Donald Trump did was that he, in fact, released the transcript of the conversation. And Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff, had to now run a different course of action on the American people. So that's why he said last week, you don't even need quid pro quo in order to impeach the president. So now people are saying we need to stop him from violating the Constitution. No, that's not a violation of the Constitution. That's in line with the Constitution, because the impeachment process, unlike what they have been presenting it as being, the impeachment process is a political process. It does not mean that the framers intended for it to be used politically, but it's a political process and it can be used for that. But because it is a political process, they wanted to head off political abuse, and that's why when it goes to trial, if you're trying to use it to remove a president because you don't like the outcome, for example, of the last election, which you didn't like the outcome of the election in 2016, then it may be, since it can be used for that purpose, the framers then in Article 2, not in Article 1, folks, where the impeachment process is in fact explained, but where the trial is held, which is placed in the Senate, and therefore the terms of that is in Article 2, not in Article 1, Article 2. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually read, and I don't know if it's true or not, so I don't want to be, but I have read that actually Hillary said somewhere in a speech or in a talk she was giving that she actually considers she actually, in her mind, she won the election.
Because she doesn't understand, that's another thing we have to deal with these politicians. Yeah. See, we assume, that's I wrote about that day on my Facebook post. You know, we don't understand that just because you win an elective office, she was a senator, and she was Secretary of State, appointed position by Barack Obama. And we assume that when you get an elective office, you must know something. And that's an assumption that we make, but we don't have any evidence of it. In fact, the evidence points in the opposite direction. And just listen to the comments they made. Hillary Clinton saying that she won the election. Or Barack Obama told us that there were 57 states. How smart is that? Alaska was the 49th state. And then Hawaii became the 50th state. Where did we get 7 additional states from? And he said that more than one time. So he actually believed there were 57 states. I guess being in Hawaii, off the coast, he wasn't privy to the 48 contiguous states. That means the states that touch each other. And then there are 2 states outside of the contiguous states that don't touch each other, don't touch any of the states. Alaska and Hawaii in the South Pacific. I guess he didn't, from over there, realize that there were 48 contiguous states, and there was 1 state, in addition to Hawaii, that's not contiguous, and therefore 50 states altogether, not 57 states. But anybody say anything about that? No, because you give the Democrats a pass.
Oh, I said it one time in a posting, and this liberal came off. I think he's smarter than that. He knows it. You really think?
No, he's not smart.
Yeah, it's like yeah. I said, and somebody even had to step in and said he did say that in a speech he was given or a reference he made. He did say there's 57 states.
Yeah.
And they can't admit. See, that's the thing is the left cannot admit when they're wrong.
Yeah.
They've always do this thing like, well, then they'll go down to transactional analysis. I did this because you did that. Because this party did this, we did that. See, it's always somebody else is the cause of their. So they're admitting to being reactionary.
Yeah, so. They keep bragging. They keep bragging about Lawrence Tribe was their teacher. He taught. What's that guy's name over there on CNN? That lawyer. Is that Jeffrey Toobin? I think it's Jeffrey Toobin. And they keep talking about. He was taught by Lawrence Tribe, and Obama was taught by Lawrence Tribe. Lawrence Tribe didn't know anything. He misunderstands the impeachment process, also. He didn't know anything. Anytime you're telling us that you have to use Article 2 about impeachment, which is defined and placed in Article 1, but what is required is placed in Article 2, if you even understand how wrong that is. Why would you, in fact, put the impeachment in the hands of the House in Article 1, and then place in another article, the article that sets up the president, and then put down the particulars that it requires to bring about impeachment, which you put in Article 2? Does that make any sense? The framers were too smart to do that. If it required treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, listen carefully, Lawrence Tribe, because you're just as confused as the rest of them are. If it took treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors to impeach a president, you would have put it in Article 1. I mean, folks, these people are not bright. And then they taught Hillary Clinton. And I mean, she went there. She went to Wesley and wrote a paper which shows how light she is. Her master's was written on Saul Alinsky because that's who she admired. And that's who she would have been if she had been elected in 2016. And she's been talking about she won the election. We have not had a single president. And we've had 44 different presidents, 45 presidencies, but 44 different presidents because Grover Cleveland was elected in non-consecutive terms, was elected in 1884 and elected again in 1892 because Benjamin Harrison came in between the 2 elections of Grover Cleveland. He was number 22 and 24. Benjamin Harrison was 23. And she's talking about she won the election. She said that she could beat him again. You haven't beaten him the first time. Because you can't talk about having won the election if you don't win the electoral vote. The framers were too smart to let a single majority vote decide the presidency. And for her to say that, it just shows you how Hillary Rodham Clinton doesn't know anything, because that's just basic to our republic. How we choose the CEO, the President of the United States, how we choose the president is fundamental to the country. Why? Because the president is the only office holder where the entire electorate decides. And when they go to the polls and vote, what they are deciding is who the electors are going to be in those states. And if those states get a majority of the vote, then the electors of that party that got the majority vote in that state, they go to their state capital and cast their ballots for that office holder based upon the voting that occurred in the states. That majority does it in Michigan, the majority did it in Wisconsin, they did it in Pennsylvania, they did it in all the other 47 states, not the other 54 states, because they're not 57 states, Obama, they're 50 states. And if you don't know that, you're dumb as a doorknob. And he's not that bright. You can. I know people don't like me saying that. I said it because that's true. This man was a disaster in this country, and he ought to go. And he ought to have enough integrity now that he's not president to walk away. And he hasn't done that because he doesn't have any integrity. This man went behind the elected president and was going behind him, telling people in these countries that they didn't have to listen to him. And they even telling, you see, you talking about back channeling and private conversations. You know what? Some of the reason why Russia is hesitant to make a deal with Donald Trump is because the uncertainty of Trump in the presidency. So they think they can wait him out and get a better deal. That's what they're waiting for. Because there's back channeling going on right now. You're probably aware of this because you've seen it in terms of some of the reports that have come out where they have these back channel conversations. Obama was doing it right now in the aftermath of the election. They didn't think Donald Trump was going to survive the first few months in the White House. They were talking about impeaching him as soon as he got in. 19 days after he was inaugurated, not even after he was in, 19 days after he was inaugurated, 19 days after he was elected. They were talking about impeaching Donald Trump at that point, and people were watching to see if that was going to happen. And Obama was going around, if you go back and look at the news, Obama was going around and telling the leaders of the world they didn't have to listen to Donald Trump. He would not be there that long. And I actually think even now we ought to invoke the Logan Act because there is a law against somebody in the private citizenship or even in the public citizenship to go around and undermine the government of the United States to foreign leaders. I guess what I'm saying here, and I'll say it out loud, the sedition of the Obama administration, he was definitely involved in sedition. The sedition of the Obama administration is continuing to this very day. And that's why he's back out there on the public scene, because he understands what's happening. That Donald Trump, if they don't stop him, he's going to get a second term. And that's why, with certainty, they are going to impeach this president. They are between that political and proverbial rock and a hard place, and they don't have no choice in the matter. They got to impeach Donald Trump to slow the momentum down. Because if that girl is on fire, Donald Trump is on fire. He's locked in with what the American people want their president to do, which is serving the American people. What do they want the president to do? They want the president to put America first. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. And they're telling us that Donald Trump is a stooge of Putin. I mean, they don't have respect for you and me.
You see, the left is really.
Can you believe they're saying that?
The left is really mad at Russia for abandoning communism. They still haven't got over that fact. Okay, they're still enamored with communism, and they're bewildered that their hero, the Soviet Union, no longer exists. And they're like, that's now Putin's evil because he's actually wants to reassert nationalism in Russia. And let's face it, what are the other former satellites are doing now? Are they better or worse than Russia? I think a lot of them are probably much worse than shape. Yet I don't like Putin. I don't. He is a gangster, but I don't like our own politicians all that much either. I don't see much difference. I don't. And the more and more we hear about these people's connections to Ukraine and stuff, and all these people who've got jobs with qualifications they don't exist. How is this any different? The whole premise of our own government is basically we got to pay them so they will keep off our backs. Protection money. So they're not much different than the mob anyway.
No, they're not.
No, they're not much different anyway.
John, breaking news. All the politicians on the planet, did I say all? Capitalize the word all. All the politicians on the planet are gangsters. That's what I'm holding up this book by Ayn Rand called For the New Intellectuals. And Ayn Rand calls the politicians Attila. And that's what they are. They are the men of force. And that's what is recognized by your Constitution, our Constitution. Because the Constitution is written to restrain them. Because the framers knew who they were. And they had to get in that, and they were in that room from June 25th, 1787 to September the 17th, 1787, 8 days short of being in that room, that mosquito-infested room. 8 days short of 3 months, having out how to create a government, because the articles didn't work. Because what the articles did was create a non-government. Yeah, they had a name up there, but that was just about all. So that fear that they had in creating the articles in 1781, they still had that fear in that room. But the way it played out with the articles, that had not worked because they're so weak in the government, it could not respond. And those chickens came home to roost in 1786 with the Shays Rebellion. So they now realize that they had so weakened the government that it put all of the colonies in danger, and now they got to fix that. That's why they're in that room. And they come up with something that would, in fact, not so weaken the federal government that it could not act. At the same time, they didn't want to act out of control, acting arbitrarily and capriciously against the liberties of the country. And they had to figure that out. And they did it, and they did figure it out. But if you think any of these people like Hillary Clinton understand what they did, they don't understand it. Because the people running this country, and I wrote about it today, and Facebook won't be able to do anything with that because I was very measured. See, I have to pay attention to how I'm saying things because Facebook is just, they're looking for a way to get me. Because they know I know. And they know I'm not on their side. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on the side of truth. I don't care. See, that's why I don't care. I don't care what people say. You know, when I came out against Obama, you'd be surprised. I couldn't even go to, I went to the store, but you'd be surprised at how people would get out of their lane and come over there in my lane. And you can believe this. Every last one of them, I got them out of my face real quick. Because I don't go on defense. And so they're not in my face as much now because they recognize what they're dealing with. And what you're dealing with is somebody that you can't back down, and you don't like that. I don't care if you like it or not. I could care less. So I'm writing about this on Facebook, but I have to be measured because I don't want to give Facebook any cover to do what they have to do with those of us out here that understand what's going on and understand it better than they do. Understand it better than all you scholars do. I understand this document. And that's why I can say with absolute certainty that nobody in the public domain on these television network programs, that nobody that's on these programs that are talking about impeachment understand the process. And that includes all of those heavyweights, all those scholars who don't understand it because what they're saying is not true. Adam Schiff, we are coming after you because you are the face of the corruption right now in Washington. And we've got to set you down with this. Okay, I got to get out of here, but we'll be back next week with another edition of What's Going On allpointstv.com. Until that time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.